do stuff. How many people knew that? This is one of the things that people have no clue of when I talk about the Bible, when I ask them about the God of Israel. So many people talk about the God of Israel, the God of Jacob, they have no clue that these are not the same gods. And we're going to get into that in this Bible. You got to understand that, yes, your Bible speaks of many gods. And God, the God, was the leader of them all. God had a council with him leading a bunch of other gods. The Bible talks about it. So we're going to read 1 Kings 22, 19 through 24. And I'm going to start here. It says, I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing beside him on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, who will entice Ahab that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said one thing, and another said another. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, I will entice him. And the Lord said to him, by what means? And he said, I will go out and will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he said, you are to entice him, and you shall succeed. Go out and do so. Now, therefore, behold, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these your prophets, and the Lord has declared disaster for you. So now when you read this is not the only verse. There are more verses that goes on where it's talking about God and his counsel. Psalms 89:7 says, a God greatly to be feared in the counsel of the holy ones, and awesome above all who are around him. 1 Chronicles 16:25 says, for great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised, and he is to be feared above all gods, implying that there are more than one God. So when you get into this whole thing, it's so many verses that's actually talking about God and his counsel, and that these are beings. You might as well call them Elohim. These are different gods who have different jobs, and we're going to get into that. So we just read in the Bible, God speaking to his divine counsel. So God has this counsel, and he asks them to do things. You have other beings speaking in the council to other beings, and you have, stuff going on within this council. So, it starts to make sense, a lot of things, when you think about, well, wait a minute, it's not just God. There are more than one God. So you have reference to other gods in the Bible. So this is the thing, man. It's key pieces in the book that if you don't know about, it just throws everything out of whack. I mean, it could be one key point that's going to make about, 6-7 books of the Bible make sense. But the one key point is only going to be found in like 2 or 3 verses. And that's the thing with the Bible, which is why you got to read the entire book, and you have to study it and understand this. How many preachers are talking about this divine counsel? Not many of them. So now, who is this divine counsel? Who are these beings in this council? They are the Elohim. You got to understand, the Bible calls many different beings Elohim. You have the Bible calling demons Elohim. Dead people Elohim. Remember in 1 Samuel, it called, when Samuel came back, it called him Elohim, his dead spirit, his dead body, whatever. And you have goddesses called Elohim, angels called Elohim. There's so many different beings that are called Elohims. All Elohim is not a name. It's basically like a title. It's basically like where you come from. Elohim are beings that come from the spiritual world, or spiritual beings. That's all it is. They refer to them as Elohims. So that's a major thing that you have to understand, that Elohims are just spiritual beings from, the spiritual world. Now, remember in the book of Enoch, you have the Watchers. Now, remember, the Watchers had jobs, one of which was to watch, to watch Earth. These Elohim, or these members of the divine council, also have positions. They also have jobs. Now, you have the cherubim and the seraphim, who are both guardians of the throne of God. Now, when you read Isaiah 6:1-2, It says, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. But the cherubim you basically find in Mesopotamia, and the seraphim you find in Egypt. So now this is the seraphim. This is what it looks like. As you can see, it has 6 wings. It is a serpent or a dragon with 6 wings, like the Bible speaks of. So now when you look at depictions of the seraphim, you see that they are dragons or serpents. You see 6 wings. So you have basically like a flying serpent. So you have flying serpents with 6 wings, or flying serpents guarding the throne of God. So now when we go to Kemet, because as I said, the seraphim are Egyptian, more Egyptian, you always find depictions of them, and they always are associated with Egypt. So when you go to Egypt and you look at Akhenaten's throne, or Tutankhamun's, King Tut's throne, you can see the flying serpent on the throne. Take a look. You can see it on the back as well. You have flying serpents. As I said, there are many mentions of serpents or flying serpents in the Bible. When you read Isaiah 14, 26 through 29, it's talking about just that. It says, "This is the purpose that is purposed upon the whole earth, and this is the hand that is stretched out upon all the nations. For the Lord of hosts has purposed, and who shall disannul it? And his hand is stretched out, and who shall turn it back? In the year that King Ahaz died was this burden. Rejoice not thou, whole Palestina, because the rod of him that smote thee is broken. For out of the serpent's root shall come forth a cockatrice, that his fruit shall be a fiery flying serpent." So this is a cockatrice. Take a look. It is like a dragon mixed with like a bird, as you can see. So what do they have on the W-Rhea? You have a bird, you have a serpent. You got to understand and start putting this stuff together, because it's trying to tell you something. One of the weird things is when you look at the evolution that they give us of the dinosaur. There's something that I wanted to get into a little bit if I had time. But you can see that one of the explanations they give for the dinosaurs is that they evolved into birds. That, most of the major dinosaurs died out and others evolved into something else. That's one of the things that I want to tell us what the something else is, but I went into that a little bit in part 2. But the other thing is that most of these reptilians or dinosaurs evolved into birds, birds that we still see today. So now we already established that the cherubim and the seraphim are basically these serpentine beings. But when you get into the whole thing, they are basically shapeshifters. They could be 1 minute serpents or dragons or even, humans, as it talks about in the book of Enoch. So now the thing is, when you get into the Dead Sea Scrolls, and this is weird. Now, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, you have fragment 4Q, 543, 545, and 548, which is the Testament of Amram. And it basically identifies the Watchers with serpents. I'm just going to read this highlighted area. It says, "This consists again of a visionary recital of the most intense kind, similar to that in chapters 1 and 2, the firm foundation materials above, and in chapter 7. Here too, several identifications are made. First, in line 13 of manuscript B, the Enochic Watchers are identified with the serpent, with the visage of a viper, evidently the same serpent that is connected to the downfall of man in the Adam and Eve story. We have probably already encountered him as well in the tree of evil text above. Now, I want to go through this whole thing, but it's basically saying that the Watchers were serpents as well. Now, remember, as I said, these Watchers had jobs. So when we read Enoch chapter 20, it says, "And these are the names of the holy angels who watch: Uriel, one of the holy angels who is over the world and over Tartarus. Raphael, one of the holy angels who is over the spirits of men. Raguel, one of the holy angels who takes vengeance on the world of the luminaries. Michael, one of the holy angels, to wit, he that is set over the best part of mankind and over chaos. Seraquel, one of the holy angels who is set over the spirits who sin in the spirit. Gabriel, one of the holy angels who is over paradise and the serpents and the cherubim. Ramiel, one of the holy angels whom God set over those who rise. So we have Gabriel supposed to be guarding these reptilians or these serpents, and they down on earth running amok according to the Bible. So, like I said, these beings had jobs. You had the watchers who had their jobs, and then you had people who are supposed to be watching the watchers. I mean, it's position, it's rank that's going on within this whole council, within this whole order when you pay attention. Now, when you look at it and you go and start to read the versions of the story of the book of Enoch and this whole thing with the watchers, it talks about how the watchers were banished basically underground. We said below the earth, which is basically underground. So we read these stories about, reptilian beings live underground and, grays live underground and dragons and all this stuff like that. I talked about in part 2 about, the lizard people underground in California, the reptilians underground, and so many stories that you look at and you can see that, the Bible is, paralleling these stories. And it's funny because don't nobody talk about this. You never heard any of this stuff in church. This is why I am the way that I am with Christians and these Hebrews, because I know they are not reading the book. You don't hear them talk about none of this stuff. You can't look at the Bible and look at this stuff and just, brush it to the side. It's alluding to something. We know these serpents are most likely dealing with dinosaurs or dragons, which we know dinosaurs or dragons actually exist. This all has to do with some kind of parable or something that actually exists on earth or something that happened on earth. And the Bible is retelling it in a different way, not giving us the whole complete story, but giving it to us in parables. And it's up to us to compare it to real facts in real life to figure out the story, which is what this series is about. This whole Saturn, Satan, and God series is about exactly that. And I'm glad you guys was actually able to purchase this DVD and get this information. And yeah, I wanted to put this out for free, but I only had about 40 people actually buy the last DVD, so I wasn't able to raise enough that I needed to put the book out. So I didn't really want to sell this. I wanted to put it out, but hopefully I get enough people to buy it to where part 4 I could just put out for free, because this information should get out. But give yourself credit for being one of the people who feel like this is important, this information is important, and respecting this series and the information that's in it, because you're going to get something in this video that nobody is going to get, and it's not many people on YouTube talking about this stuff, and the ones who are completely off. The problem is a lot of these people are so scared of Egypt, and in case you haven't realized it, Egypt is the key to everything. That's why it is the most written about subject of all time. So not the Bible, not religion, it is ancient Egypt, because everything goes back there. Listen to me. Whatever truth you're trying to find, whatever you're trying to figure out, it's in Kemet, period. Everything goes back there. But these people can't wrap their head around it because their mind is into this whole, believing that Jesus was real, and they're taking the Bible literally, and they just look at Egypt as being this evil place, and they don't understand the wealth, the plethora of information that is there that basically answers all the questions. And when you go there and you study, everything just starts to unfold, especially when you know the Bible. Because if you don't know the Bible, you're not going to pick up on this stuff. But these people look at Egypt, or they run into something that has to do with Kemet, and they automatically say the devil, and they leave it alone. And that's by design. So this is why they don't get the whole story that I'm giving you now. So now the thing is this: if these people were smart, if they knew anything, if you go right now, we sit here and we're talking about these serpents and shape-shifting beings and all this and that. And you can look at the Bible and see, these stories about serpentine beings and, serpents guarding the throne of God. If you go now, you fly to Egypt, right? And you go to Hyperstyle Hall. Hyperstyle Hall and the whole temple of Hathor. You walk in there and you look up, this is what you'll see. Now look there on the ceiling, you can see exactly what we're talking about. You have serpents basically walking upright, moving upright. And it almost look like they're shifting or changing into something else. And other glyphs that you can see them go from a serpent status to like a bird. But you see them in reptilian form as well. This is on the ceiling right now in the temple of Hathor. Now, the funny thing about these pictures is I actually had to buy these pictures because a lot of the ones you find on Google has the watermark on it, and I had to actually purchase these. Bullshit you not. But there were some good ones in there, and I wanted to get them. And I didn't want to spend all day on Google trying to find ones that look like these. I have other ones as well that I bought. But, I mean, pay attention. Look at the imagery. This is everything we're talking about right here. I mean, what is that? You have these reptilian beings, you have these serpents. And then you look over on the wall and take a look at what you see. You have the Egyptians. They're huge, first of all. That's something we're going to get into. And you have this serpent inside this tube. Whatever that is, whatever's going on is dealing with this serpent. So, I mean, this all fits into everything that we're talking about, and it's right there in Kemet, and people have no clue. Now, this is from the book, Return of the Serpents of Wisdom. Now, remember, I talked about this in part 2. There were good serpents. Remember in part 2, I was talking about how the women worshiped these serpent beings and how they had, figurines and everything like that. And how, it was a good relationship. I mean, you find the same thing in the book of Enoch with the whole story about, remember the Watchers had to be good at some point and then they turned bad. Something happened in both cases. We don't know what happened with the women, going from worshiping them as good beings to, this whole story of war, but it says here, perhaps the earliest written record of the arrival of the serpent missionaries to Mesoamerica was composed by Bernardo de Salhan. They pronounce it Shalhan, kind of like lasagna. You got that G that makes a different sound, but Shalhan, a Franciscan monk who arrived in Mexico following the Spanish conquest and became the official historian for his people. Now, the whole thing with this guy is, he is well known and actually named the city Shalhan after him. So this tells you that this story is not just from some crazy guy. They named the city of Shalhan after him. And this city is in the whole state of Hidalgo in Mexico. So, this is somebody who is prominent that they give credit to, that is reputable. So, when I go on to read this story, don't think it's just some wacko. This is somebody who is highly respected. So now it goes on to say, through numerous conversations with the Nahuatl old people, he learned that the forefathers of Mesoamericans were serpents who came east from the direction of Florida. They came sailing along the coast and disembarked in the port of Panuco, and their colonizing party was wise old men who had all the writings, the books, the paintings, which they had carried with them from their homeland, perhaps Atlantis, it says. The serpents proceeded to build a city called Tamoanchin. 200 years after Shalhan history was published, Edward Thompson, a United States consul and archaeologist who was sent to Mexico, was able to elaborate on the arrival of the early Mesoamerican serpent colonists. The source of much of his information came from certain Mayan brotherhoods, such as the secret brotherhood of Chatal, which Thompson was fortunate enough to gain initiation into. Through his spiritual mentors, Thompson learned that the meaning of the Tamoanchin was the place where the people of the serpent landed. And as Shalhan had rightfully claimed many years earlier, the ancient city had been built along the banks of the Panuco River, the entrance to which was near Tucpan on the Veracruz coast. The founders of the port city Thompson discovered were the Chinese, or people of the serpent, who arrived in vessels possessing sides which shone like the scales of a serpent's skin. And to the simple natives who saw them approaching, they appeared to be great serpents coming swiftly towards them. Upon disembarking, these serpents appeared to be clad in strange garments, and they were about their foreheads emblems like entwined serpents. The wondering natives who met them at the shore saw the manner of their coming with the symbol of the sacred serpent, which they worshipped on their brows. So we find these stories about these serpentine beings, the early Mesoamericans coming from these serpentine beings, and they're basically coming in and colonizing and setting up civilizations in Mesoamerica. Now, when you go to Sago, Utah, a lot of people heard about this, the cave art there, where it shows depictions of basically what we see in Hyperstar Hall, in the Temple of Hathor, on the ceiling. You have these serpents, and it look like they walking, and they're doing something, but these beings look like serpentine beings or serpents moving upright. And the art is like dated between 8,000 and 500 BCE, and it's a lot of it. So we're talking about basically almost the same area, Mesoamerica and Utah. So you have stories that line up with each other about this, this serpent race. And it's weird how we are not told about this. And I also talked about the Chinese. Now, in the Yucatan, Chinese means people of the serpent. But in the Yucatan, you find stories about the Chinese being ruled by Itzimna. Now, soon as I found out this, when I started reading about the Chinese and I seen the name Itzimna, it automatically popped in my head, probably in some of your heads as well. I'm a huge Marvel Comics fan. So as soon as I heard the name Itzimna, I was like, wait a minute. Itzimna is from the Marvel Universe. Take a look here. It's Itzimna. You see him over there, and he is with other gods. But you also find Itzimna in the Council of Godheads. The Council of Godheads. Think about that. Now, let me read a little bit here. It says, and this council, elite of the divine pantheons of Earth, first met to confront the arrival of these titans from deep space. For those of you who do not know me, I am Athena Parthenius, born fully grown from the brow of Zeus, until giver of life to the Inca, Horus, avenger of Osiris, pharaoh of the Black Land, Nzengi no Makito, father of the Japanese home island. All of us must stand united as this dark time descends upon us. If humanity falls, we fall with them. And at no point has humanity's extermination been so close at hand. So now this is why I tell people to pay attention to X-Men, especially the old comics. And when you look at the movies now, you can see why there's so much so-called Illuminati stuff, paired with the whole X-Men movies. So now it's weird how you get into these stories and you see how, mythology from a lot of different places fits into these Bible stories. When you read that comic, it's like gods from like every other race that's a part of that whole Marvel Council when you really pay attention. So you have this council, like this whole theme of a council we find in the Bible. We find it in the Marvel stories as well. They're trying to tell you something. You got to really pay attention. So now when you look at the whole thing with the Watchers coming down and having sex with women, when you look at that, we can almost compare it to the stories of, aliens coming down and doing stuff on Earth. So you basically have beings coming from, above and to Earth and doing things they shouldn't be doing. Now, the thing is, you hear the stories about the different races of extraterrestrials. So now when we read the Bible, when we go back in Genesis, when God says, let us make man in our image after our likeness, we know that the people he's talking to now is his council. We know he's talking to them. We also know that members of his council are reptilians. We also know that we have reptilian DNA in us. We share common traits. So suffice it to guess that some kind of pairing with a humanoid, which would be God, the main God himself, and his reptilian, and whatever else took place and created us. Now we know something happened in the Bible as far as the Elohim. Now in the Bible, God basically gives them jobs. He puts them over the nations. The problem is, and how, the war breaks out and how it becomes problems in heaven, according to the Bible in the book of Enoch, is that these angels basically turn the people against God and against Israel. So when we read Psalms 82, it says, God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. How long will you judge unjustly? This is the God of Israel talking to the other gods. And show partiality to the wicked. Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. They have neither knowledge nor understanding. They walk about in darkness. All of the foundations of the earth are shaken. I said, you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men, you shall die and fall like any prince. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all the nations. Now it says in the footnote here, or fall as one man, O prince. So that's why the God of Israel is the one speaking out, because they are trying to turn against him. So when you read 83, it says, O God, do not keep silent. Do not hold your peace or be still, O God, for behold, your enemies make an uproar. Those who hate you have raised their heads. They lay crafty plans against your people. They consult together against your treasured ones. They say, come, let us wipe them out of a nation. Let the name of Israel be remembered no more. So this is why he is speaking out, and he's telling God, hey, do something to them. What's going on? You see what they're trying to do? They're trying to stop us. They're trying to shut us down. He's talking to God and pleading with him to take action against these other gods. So to the people who always say there is no other gods, there's only God. Yes. There are other gods, clearly, the Bible speaks of, but this one God is supposed to be ruling them all. But there is deception, as you can read. So, this is all figurative. This is not something that actually happened. These stories are alluding to something. So, as I said, we can look at the whole Nephilim coming down, the Watchers coming down, as aliens coming down. As a matter of fact, if you've ever seen the movie called The Devil's Tomb with Cuba Gooding Jr., this is exactly what they are implying about the Watchers or the Nephilim being aliens. Now, what are Grays doing in the movie about the devil? About the Bible. You have aliens in a movie about the Bible. So somebody's trying to tell you something. Also, when you look at the movie Prometheus, Prometheus was a Greek god, and also Prometheus is the name of one of the moons of Saturn. So in that movie, of course, you had aliens who basically created man. That's what the movie is implying. Aliens created man, and you had these people going to one of the moons of Saturn, basically. You can see they pass Saturn in the movie, and they go there and they find this alien being. Now, of course, they got to keep up white supremacy, and the alien being who's supposed to be amongst the creators of humans is this big, tall, white being. And they showed in the beginning of the movie as well as these white beings creating men. Now, we know for a fact that all races came from African people, from black people, but they got to keep up their white supremacy. Now, a lot of you have heard about the giant black beings. You heard people talking about black aliens making the rings of Saturn. And you heard about Norman Bergeron, who talked about these giant black beings, that he saw a picture of them, and he talks about them in his book. Now, so many people are obsessed with these giant black beings. There's videos all over YouTube, and I'm surprised, most people haven't just figured this out. To me, when I hear about giant black beings, there's only one place that comes to mind, and that's ancient Egypt. When you look at the depictions of the Egyptians and some of the hieroglyphics, you can see that they are giants. Look at them. A lot of people just figured that they made these to say that, oh, well, he was somebody of importance. That's why he was huge. But pay attention to some of the pictures. Take a look. It makes sense when you start looking at them and you think about the pyramids and you think about the size of the statues. I know this. If I had to build a statue of a pharaoh and he wasn't that big, I wouldn't waste the time and effort to build some of these colossal statues that were built of these pharaohs. I mean, look at them. They are huge, humongous, giant. When you think about the blocks of the pyramids, I mean, these had to be some huge beings that started this whole thing off. If you've seen the movie Gods and King or the Gods of Egypt, you remember in that movie they had Horus as a giant. He was a giant. So it's trying to tell you something. These beings, I believe, these Egyptians, the original ones, were giants. They were huge. They were what the Bible described as Nephilim. And when you start to tie the whole story together, it makes a little more sense. Now, I know a lot of you are going to say, why are some Egyptians big and some like regular size? But I want you to think about something. Saturn is huge. Now, these black beings are supposed to be coming from Saturn. Saturn is a huge planet. Maybe it's something about Saturn or the atmosphere or something that causes them to be that size. It would make sense for them to be that size since the planet is so big. And for us to be the size we are, since the planet is so big. Maybe it's something to that effect. I'm only speculating here. But the whole thing is, when you tie into the whole story, think about it. If you had something happen on Saturn, remember I talked about in part 1 how you had many prominent researchers say that Saturn was once inhabited and that Earth could have been one of the moons of Saturn, like Titan, which is supposed to be like Earth. And something happened. So just think, maybe something happened and you had the Egyptians, who were these tall beings, come to Earth and, start mankind here for whatever reason. And, it started out with the women. The women can, produce on their own. So think about the whole story in the book of Enoch. So after a while, you had these women here and they, creating a society. So you have the women would look exactly like the women in, coming from Saturn or just like the Egyptians, because in the hieroglyphics, you see tall women as well, not just men, women as well. But imagine they coming down to Earth, just like it says, the sons of God, or these gods coming to Earth and seeing the women that they was fair, and they married them and they had sex with them. So you had these Egyptians creating life on Earth, or, starting a civilization on Earth. And because of our atmosphere, because of maybe something that has to do with that we were not as tall as they were. But you got to look at the range. Some of these giant beings, they say, range between 7 and 30 feet tall. So, 7, 8 foot. I mean, that's something normal that we see on the planet. I mean, we talking about Shaq and Hoops. So a giant coming down and having sex with a woman, I mean, that's Shaq and Hoops, or Yao Ming and his lady, or Manute Bol and his wife. We talking about that kind of a ratio. Yeah, it will look weird. They will look like giants to the average person when you look at their stature. But it is possible for them to have sex. But let's speculate here and say they came down, they had sex, they bear children. But we know something happened. We know something involving these reptilian beings took place. Now, if it's true and they can shapeshift, but they are of reptilian origin, they wouldn't be necessarily like the Egyptians or the ones who created us. These black beings, the only thing I can think of, as far as black extraterrestrials or black beings, are these Egyptians, these tall Egyptians, and it has something to do with it. They was obsessed with space, as if they came from there. Something happened, some kind of war or something, to where the giant Egyptians are gone. Maybe they was killed off. I don't know. But something happened. We're going to get into that as we go along in this series. But something had to have happened to them. So when we look at this whole thing having to do with this council, I mean, this one leader in a congregation or a council, I mean, it's like the same thing with church. You have in the pulpit, you got the pastor, and he has his deacons, and you got the head usher, and you got the choir director. So you have the head dude and his council. I mean, it's the same thing with the president. You have the president, and he has his council. You know what I'm saying? It's just like the structure is set up exactly the way the Bible structure is set up. Same thing in ancient Rome. You had the Caesar, and you had his, Senate. just like America as well. So we can see these structures all over. And now what they're trying to do is create a one world order where there's one ruler. So you have this one ruler and, his council, just like basically in the Bible. So me personally, from my research, without getting too much into it, which I might later on if I have time in the next video, the whole thing is, I think that we are caught up in some kind of diplomatic something, some kind of politics, some kind of universal politics that's involving Earth. This is where my research is leading me. Now, I want to give you one of the reasons why I believe this, because one, and you're not going to believe this when I say it, I'm going to tell you, because I'm going to show you in part 4, how everything that they are doing to us is according to some kind of code. But technically, it's all legal. Everything that's going on. I know you're going to say, well, they murder people, this and that. It's legal. It's all legal, and they all abide by this one code. Like, think about it. These people want to take over the world. They can complete their agenda anytime. If they really wanted to wipe black people out, they could wipe us out at any time. But from my research, it seems like they're following some kind of code, that they have to make these laws and abide by these universal laws in order to do something. Because they obviously have the power to where they could have been taken over. Now, I wanted to be real, cocky and say it has something to do with the human spirit, or we're fighting back and we're winning against them. Understand, there are rules that they are following. And I'm going to point this out. It's amazing when you look into it. Nobody else is talking about this. There are rules and guidelines that they are following to do what they are doing. It's some kind of galactic, something going on that we are caught up in that's political. And it's something that is crazy that I want to get into in part 4 too, that has to do with, the whole flat earth thing, stuff that we got to look at and we got to start digging into, because some things have a lot of validity and I can't just, cast them aside and say, it's crazy without going into them, because I have encountered them, in my research. So, we're going to get into that in part 4. To tie all this stuff together, you basically have the Bible telling us about this council. And this council is basically defying God, and they came here and did some things they wasn't supposed to do. Also, when you look at, Egyptian hieroglyphics, when you look at ancient stories and depictions, you have almost a story about these serpents as well coming down and, doing something here, starting something. We know man and the dinosaurs coexisted. Something happened with that situation, and we're going to get into that. But, it's a lot that I have to establish first before I go into certain areas. And it's just going to take a lot of time for me to do that. That's why I said I can't do 3. I got to do way more than 3 videos. But I'm going to get into a lot in part 4. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch and actually purchase this DVD. It actually means a lot. But, it's a lot more I have to get into before we get into quantum physics, or you will be lost. Trust me, you'll see what I mean when we get into this and how it ties in. Oh my goodness. It's amazing. But it's also going to tie into the stuff, these rules. Understand, as I said, we know why they do stuff according to numerology. We got to think about why they sacrifice on certain dates, why things happen at certain times, why we do things at certain dates and times. It's a whole system that they must follow, and it's rules to this whole thing. And once we understand it, it's going to be a way for us to really predict what they're doing, because they are bound by these rules. And I'm going to point that out. And it's going to be a way for us to actually win. I mean, to me, this is a dangerous DVD. And, I do get worried sometimes putting out information, but then I realize that, some people have alluded to this information in some way, shape, or form. And it's just up to us to put it all together. So thank you guys for watching. And I'm so glad, again, that you purchased the DVD, you watched the whole thing and made it to the end. There's a lot more that's going to be in part 4 that's going to start tying things together. And it's going to be a part 5 and possibly a part 6 if I can't fit everything into part 4 and 5. So we'll see. This is the end of the DVD. Again, I appreciate you guys for purchasing it. And I'm really, really thankful for your support, and I really appreciate it. As I said, not so many people supported in the last DVD, so hopefully I can reach the goal that I'm going for in this DVD. And I'm glad you guys appreciate it and appreciate this series. I have another series that's really compelling that I'm going to be putting out after this series is done, and I think you guys are going to enjoy it just as much as this one. But again, I want to thank you guys for purchasing and for watching, and I'll see you guys next video.